eerie sense of mystery that surrounds North Korea. Hardly any outsiders get in, and those who do know very little about what's actually happening within these borders. There are secrets that North Korean leaders don't want to get out, secrets about unimaginable suffering and human rights violations the people experience. Over 40% of its population is malnourished, and you can read reports of widespread food shortages. Electricity is in short supply, with most places only getting a few hours a day. Life in North Korea is extremely regulated. Their dress, their hairstyle, all of it needs to be government approved. There's essentially no freedom of speech, religion, press, or anything else the free world enjoys. And the consequences for those who resist are fatal. There's a lot North Korea doesn't want the world to see. But as hard as it is to get in, it's even harder for those who want to get out.
A North Korean defector fleeing across the border, collapsing in a hail of bullets, dragged to safety by South Korean soldiers.
On November 13th, 2017, Oh Chon-sung attempted the impossible, and he lived to tell the tale. It's a miracle he's alive. He was shot 5 times by his countrymen and lost more than half of his blood, but he survived. And he's not the only one. The more we learn about what's happening in North Korea, the more I begin to wonder, how did it come to this? What drives someone to cross a minefield in hopes of a better life? I want to get as close as I can and try to understand what life really looks like in North Korea. I want to know, can the gospel get into a place built to resist it? And what happens to those who can't get out?
We are standing here at the border of South Korea and North Korea, with the demarcation line between these two countries right behind us. Kind of overwhelmed. My heart's heavy just looking out into the reality of persecution and to the reality of unreached, and then on top of that, just starvation and other major physical needs. So it's pretty overwhelming.
That's where we're heading now. David came here like 10 years ago, and since then, things have only gotten worse. Various sources report that starvation today is the worst it's ever been since the North Korean famine of 1990, where anywhere from 250,000 to 3.5 million people starved to death. These conditions are staggering, and the only people who are better off are those in leadership. That's why most North Koreans go through every effort to become members of the Workers' Party of Korea, the ruling party reserved for those who prove their full allegiance, body and soul, to the Kim dynasty. You can see why Christians are a major target. The Democratic Republic of Korea treats any sign of Christianity as hostile, with recent reports that being found in possession of a Bible is a crime punishable by execution. There are tens of thousands of Christians right now in forced labor camps for the crime of believing that Jesus Christ is Lord. A report by the United Nations said that the gravity, scale, and nature of these violations reveal a state that does not have any parallel in the contemporary world. And it's all behind one border, considered one of the most dangerous places in the world, the demilitarized zone that divides North and South Korea. Check. We're about to get there. Even though it's called the demilitarized zone, there are tens of thousands of troops patrolling both sides of the border, plus another 750,000 on the northern side, another 500,000 on the southern side within 100 kilometers. And if that wasn't enough, there's also over 2 million landmines. At the end of World War II, having defeated the Axis powers, the United States and Allied forces forced Japan to surrender its territories, most notably Korea. At this point, the Korean peninsula was split into two, with the Soviet Union controlling the north and the United States governing the south. The north immediately began major reforms, including the redistribution of land and property. The communist government was suspicious of anything that could be construed as rebellious thinking. And wouldn't you know it, Christianity fit that bill. So many Christians migrated south. Pyongyang, which was once known as the Jerusalem of the East, a model of how Christianity could transform a nation, was abandoned. It would all get worse. This division between North and South was only supposed to last a maximum of 5 years. The plan was to prepare an official government that was wholly Korean, completely independent and totally united. But things were heating up between America and the Soviets, and it was immediately felt all the way up to this line. And suddenly, it all came crashing down in 1948. The South held elections that resulted in a Democratic president, while over in the North, a new dynasty would rise, one that would transform the peninsula forever. And it started with a name that every Korean would soon learn: Kim Il-sung. There's this song, it's called Thank You, Father Kim Il-sung. It's the first thing North Korean parents are supposed to teach their kids. It all sounds kind of worshipy, doesn't it? And it actually kind of is. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom reports that the Kim dynasty is much more than an authoritarian government. It also holds itself out as the ultimate source of power, virtue, spiritual wisdom, and truth for the North Korean people. Every home in the country has a portrait of the Kim dynasty, and inspectors visit the homes and hand out fines if the portraits are not well kept. This isn't just respect, it's full-on veneration. They're not just interested in political power, they want to be worshipped. It's not a coincidence. If you dig a little into the history of the Kims, you'll quickly learn that this whole system of worship isn't very original at all. In fact, it has its origins in a place that you and I go to every week. It's hard to understand how important Christianity was to Korea before World War II, but like we talked about in episode 1, Pyongyang was known as the Jerusalem of the East, with hundreds of thousands of Koreans turning to Christ. At the time, there were more than 800 Christian schools for Korean children, and missionary efforts were thriving. Some estimate that 1 out of every 5 or 6 Koreans was a Christian at the time. Korea was no stranger to the gospel, and neither was Kim Il-sung.
The North Korean regime is built upon the Marxism and socialist ideology, but Kim Il-sung, he a little bit modified because he was grown up as a Christian child, and his mom was the elder lady from the church. So he was grown up with full of Bible stories, and he had enough knowledge about the Bible. So I think after we become the Christians, we can find a lot of similarities between our regime system and our society activities, and all those church services in America, and all those songs in the Bible, gospel songs. It just changed the character in the song. So in North Korea, we were praising and we were singing for our dear leader, but if we change that leader to God, then we are praising God and praising Jesus.
So essentially, Kim Il-sung took what he learned in the Bible and made himself God.
Yes.
In that story.
Yes.
Rather than the one worshiping God, the one being worshipped like a God.
Yeah.
This is Grace Jo Kim. She was born in 1991 in the Hamgyong province in North Korea. She escaped North Korea in 1998, and with the help of a Korean pastor, has been living in the U.S. as a refugee since 2008, raising awareness for the desperate needs of the men and women and children forced to live under the North Korean regime. She's also a follower of Jesus who understands how the Kim dynasty is distorting the Christian faith for personal gain.
If I go back to 1996, I was 5.5 years old at the time, and my family were constantly starving. And I remember I was drinking cold water from the nearby river for 10 days straight without eating any food or protein. And then about 2 years, we were constantly hungry like that, and we were trying to search some food from the government-operated farms, but we couldn't find any. And we also lived in the mountain to collect wild vegetables and wild fruits, but that doesn't help a lot. And then winter season is the most difficult season for North Korean defectors because it's hard to find the natural food from the nature too. So after for 2 years, starvation, we all were suffering with the malnutrition. And my father, he decided to go to China to get help from one of his distant relatives back in 1997. And he went to China for 3 times, and the third time when he came back, he got caught, and he were detained in the local detention center, and a lot of chaos happened and tragedies happened in that year. But if I make a short story, we lost our father to our regime, and my grandmother, she passed away by starvation, and her last wish was to eat 1 baked potato. And my younger brothers, they died by hunger. And my oldest sister, she was looking for food, and she left to city to find food, but she never returned. So we lost our sister. And she was 17 years old, and my mom suspected that she was sold to China by human trafficking. And my mom, she got tortured, and she gave a birth to premature baby, 8 months old premature baby, and that baby only lived for 2 months during that difficult time. And that baby brother also died after 2 months later by starvation. And after my father died, my grandmother died, and everybody shattered. My mom was also very weak because the government took her to the detention center and tortured her, and she was bleeding, and her just physical body was so weak at the time. So she cannot carry one of my younger brother. He was 5 years old, and I was almost 7. And one of my older sisters, she was 10 years old at the time. So. But even though all the family members passed away and we didn't have food to eat, my mom still didn't think that we're gonna escape our country forever. But the last thing kind of gave her strength to leave our home country is that our government officials, about 6 of them, came to our house, and then they were yelling to my mom, and their idea is to let us leave that countryside because our family kind of become the criminal family according to North Korean law. And then they are not welcoming our family to stay in that village anymore. The reason they're asking us to leave is that, after 2 weeks, after a month later, we all have to vote for Kim Jong-il's presidential election or something. We only elected for one person, but we still need to elect, right? So they are asking, you guys have to go back to your original city to vote. But at the time it was July, and my mom was crying to them and begged them that, my children, we don't have shoes to wear, and we don't have clothes or food where we can go, and this is our home, please don't let us go. But those people, what they said was, after 15 days, we will come back and check, and if we still found out you guys are still living here, then we will burn this house down. So that was the last words we heard from our government officials, and my mom just completely just changed her heart and said, this is not my country anymore.
Every 4 to 5 years, North Korea holds local elections, like the ones Grace Jo just described, with the most recent being this past November. However, more than being opportunities for any significant change, they really serve as instruments to restrict internal movement and to track the whereabouts of Korean citizens. There's only one choice on the ballot paper, and the booths are overlooked by the portraits of the Kims as you cast your vote. It's all part of an elaborate ruse that's meant to keep the Kims at the center of power. And at its core, you'll find an ideology that you probably never heard of, Juche.
I think Juche is the main core value of ideology that Kim Il-sung modified from Marxism and socialist ideology. So the Juche ideology's core point is that man is centered. Man is the intelligent person to change new things, and intelligent man can lead the group and make a country great. Well, that's why that kind of lead that Kim Il-sung is the intelligent guy and he's the special person and who made North Korea independent and made the whole country, and he's the main person who can lead the whole country like that. So that Juche ideology kind of shaped him to become the God figure in North Korea.
So even though North Korea says it's an atheist state, the Juche philosophy behaves and feels like a religion, and the Kim dynasty are worshipped as their gods. It's not hard to see how Kim Il-sung, reared in a Christian environment with his grandparents even going to seminary, recognized the power of Christianity and deviated all of its symbols to himself. But what does Juche philosophy actually look like in day-to-day life? Every North Korean has to go to a weekly self-criticism meeting where they sing songs from a hymnal that praises the Kim dynasty. It's wild, but it was reported that a version of How Great Thou Art was sung to Kim Il-sung during his funeral. North Koreans pray looking at pictures of the Kims. They are taught to protect those portraits above all their possessions, and that if they die, they'll be reunited with the eternal president. Juche has 10 principles that are taught weekly, including you shall have no greater authority in your life than the authority of Kim Il-sung. Kim Jong-il's birthday is called the Day of the Shining Star, and North Koreans are taught that there was a double rainbow and a bright star over his birthplace. Kim Il-sung's speeches are studied as if they were holy books, and every student from kindergarten all the way to PhDs has to memorize and study his writing. North Korea even has its own calendar. It's based on the year of Kim Il-sung's birth, April 15th, 1912. To North Koreans, 2024 is the year Juche 113. It's no wonder the North Korean regime hates Christianity so much. It exposes its lies as what it is, a fraud. I've heard you say, just in previous interviews and things like that, that defectors who become Christians are categorized as serious defectors. What does that mean?
Our Juche ideology is similar to the Christian Bible, and then North Korean regime hates that people find out the true God, which is the Christianity and through the Bible. So when we got caught as citizens, we got caught in China and forcefully sent back to North Korea. And when we get there, the 보위부 is the similar level as the CIA and FBI in America. So those this level will sort out those individuals by interviews, by torturing them, and they trying to find out whether that person ever heard about the gospel, ever met the pastors and heard about the true story and true messages from Messiah. So once they found out that that individual already went to church and read the Bible, then it considered as Christians, which means, his ideology is changed. And then they know the truth, so they will not loyal to our government anymore. So that's 100% that person will stay forever in the political prison camp.
The authoritarian regime in North Korea ruthlessly tried to destroy every visible sign of Christianity. Churches, literature, and symbols have been burned and destroyed, and anybody that professes faith in Christ is categorized as hostile until death. Some estimate that as many as 70,000 citizens are imprisoned for their Christian faith. The Kims and those in power know that their whole system is based on a counterfeit version of Christianity, and they fear the power that lies in the gospel, that if their people would know the truth, they'd be set free. It sounds like a place where no Christian could survive, and yet the North Korean church is not only alive, it's growing.
North Korea, Pyongyang, once it was called Eastern Jerusalem because we had so many Christians booming up and a lot of pastors, so they were educated gospels in North Korea, and a lot of missionaries educated and start to help people and then all those spiritual activities began from Pyongyang. But after Kim Il-sung took power and Soviet Union took power, the communists came in, all the Christians got persecuted, all the churches destroyed, and all the Bibles were burned. So when I see the current North Korea, I just feel like the evil controlling the Kim's regime, and they are human beings, definitely not a god. And they have to eat, they have to sleep, and they have to go to the bathroom. So in that case, man has limited power, and God has a supreme power. So the main difference is God has love, but the Kim, the God of a human-made God, he doesn't have love. And God still loves people in North Korea. That's why he rescued those North Korean defectors and trying to raise voices for those people who are not able to. So then those Christian community outside of the North Korea can pray for them and do something spiritually. As a Christian believer in spiritual world, we still need to pray for that country so then that truth can spread all over in North Korea.
For as long as we've had persecution watch lists, North Korea has always been at the very top. And yet, Christianity keeps making a way.
In the year 2000, essentially 0% of North Koreans inside North Korea had seen a Bible with their own eyes. But now today, as of the 2020 data, now more than 8% of North Koreans have seen a Bible with their own eyes. So we're at a point in time in history where more North Koreans are reading the Bible than at any other point in history.